Daniel lived in a small town surrounded by forests. His house sat at the edge of the woods, and he liked the quiet nights there. He was a simple man, early in his 30s, with a calm routine. He worked at the local library during the day, organizing books and helping visitors, and spent his evenings walking his dog Max along the forest edge. People in the town knew Daniel as kind but quiet. He did not have many friends, but he had a gentle heart. Animals seemed to like him, and he often fed stray cats and dogs near his house. One night, after putting Max to sleep, Daniel went for his usual walk. The moon shone brightly and the wind rustled through the trees. He enjoyed these walks because they gave him time to think. But that night, something was different. A faint glow appeared in the distance among the trees. It was not the usual light from fireflies. It flickered in unusual colors, soft green and pale blue. Curious, Daniel walked closer, careful not to make noise. As he approached, he noticed movement. A small figure crouched behind a bush watching him. It was not a person. Its shape was unusual, slightly taller than a child with large eyes that reflected the moonlight. Daniel froze. Fear ran through him, but it was mixed with wonder. He had never seen anything like it before. He slowly stepped back, unsure what to do. Then a taller figure appeared behind the smaller one. It seemed protective, standing between the childlike figure and Daniel. Its skin had a soft glow and its movements were careful and gentle. Daniel realized this was the mother and the smaller one was her child. His heart pounded, but he did not feel the urge to run. Instead, he felt a strange pull to help them. Daniel remembered the food he had left outside for stray animals earlier that week. Slowly, he took a small loaf of bread from his bag and placed it on the ground near the figures. He stepped back and waited. The mother did not move, but the child cautiously approached the bread. Its hands were tiny and delicate, and it looked at Daniel with curious eyes. After a moment of hesitation, the child took the bread and began to nibble. The mother watched silently. Daniel could feel her eyes on him, as if judging his intentions. He did not want to scare them. "I'm not here to hurt you," he whispered softly, though he was not sure if they could understand him. He just wanted them to know he meant no harm. Night after night, Daniel returned. He brought small meals, bread, fruit, and sometimes milk. At first, the mother stayed hidden, keeping the child close, but slowly, she started to come closer, watching him more carefully, letting the child eat without fear. Daniel noticed that the child was intelligent. It learned quickly and started recognizing him. The child even mimicked some of his gestures, tilting its head when he did, and moving its hands slowly like he moved his own. Daniel began to feel a connection. He looked forward to these nightly visits, and he noticed a change in himself. The loneliness he had felt for years seemed to fade when he was near them. He felt protective, almost like a guardian. He also began to notice the small details, the soft hum of the mother's voice at night, the way the child's eyes sparkled in the moonlight, and the gentle way they touched each other. But it was not always easy. Daniel had to be careful. The town was small and people noticed strange behavior. One night, his neighbor, Mr. Patel, saw him walking near the forest. "Daniel, what are you doing out here so late?" Mr. Patel asked. Daniel smiled nervously and said he was just walking Max. He did not mention the visitors. He could not risk anyone discovering them. Despite the risks, Daniel continued. He learned to understand their patterns. The mother seemed to communicate through gestures and small sounds. Sometimes she pointed to the ground or to objects, and Daniel slowly understood what she meant. The child was curious and playful. It explored small areas near the edge of the woods, but always returned to the mother. One cold night, Daniel brought a small blanket. The mother accepted it silently and draped it over the child. Daniel felt a warm rush of emotion. He had never felt so connected to anyone or anything in his life. He realized that these creatures trusted him, and he trusted them. For the first time in years, he felt needed, important, and part of something special. As the days passed, Daniel's routine became more than feeding. He started talking to them, sharing small stories about his day, even if they could not understand his words. He felt that somehow, They understood the feelings behind the words. The child would tilt its head as if listening, and the mother would watch with quiet approval. Daniel also noticed that the forest seemed different when he was with them. The shadows were softer, the night air warmer. It was as if their presence made the world gentler. He started leaving small toys and objects like a shiny stone or a small wooden figure, and the child would react with delight, holding them carefully and showing them to the mother. One night, as Daniel left food and a small bowl of water, the mother finally stepped forward. She did not speak, but she allowed Daniel to approach closer than before. He knelt at a safe distance, careful not to frighten her. He held out a hand slowly. The mother lifted her hand, and for a brief moment, their fingers almost touched. Daniel felt a bond stronger than words. That night, Daniel realized that this was no ordinary encounter. He had found a family, a connection, and a sense of purpose in the quietest place of his life. He did not know who these creatures were or where they came from, but he knew one thing. He would continue to care for them no matter what. As he walked back home under the pale moonlight, he glanced at the edge of the forest. The mother and child were there, watching him leave. He smiled softly, feeling a warmth he had never felt before. The world outside might not understand, but here in this quiet corner of the woods, he had discovered something magical. After that first night, Daniel's life slowly began to revolve around the mysterious mother and child in the woods. He found himself thinking about them even during the day at the library, imagining whether they were safe and comfortable. Every evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, he felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew he wanted to help them. He started preparing small meals carefully. He would gather fresh fruits from the local market, bread, and sometimes a little milk. He even thought about little treats the child might like, though he didn't know what they ate. He placed the food on a soft cloth near the edge of the forest and stepped back, waiting patiently. At first, the mother stayed hidden, her glowing eyes watching from a distance. The child approached cautiously, sniffing the food and picking at it slowly. Night after night, the routine continued. The child grew bolder. It began to move closer to Daniel, sometimes taking food directly from his hands. Daniel noticed how clever and quick it was. The child would imitate his gestures, tilting its head, clapping softly, and even trying to mimic his gentle smile. He laughed quietly, amazed at the creature's intelligence. Each night, the child's trust in him grew, and with it, Daniel felt a growing sense of responsibility and affection. The mother, too, began to show signs of trust. She would step closer, her body language calm and careful. She never spoke, but Daniel could feel her presence like a silent shield, protecting her child while observing him. It was as if she was studying him, deciding whether he was safe. Daniel understood the importance of patience. He never forced interactions. He let them come at their own pace. During these nights, Daniel discovered patterns in their behavior. The child would follow certain paths in the forest, exploring but always returning to the mother. The mother had a rhythm too. She would move to shield the child if she sensed danger, and at times she would make a soft, musical sound that seemed like a song. Daniel could not understand the words, but the tone was soothing, full of care and warmth. He felt honored to witness this private world. Daniel began to bring more than just food. He noticed the child liked bright and shiny objects. One night he placed a small polished stone and a wooden figure near the meal. The child picked them up, examining them with curiosity and delight. It held the items carefully, then ran to show the mother. She nodded slightly, approving silently. Daniel's heart swelled. He realized that he had begun to play a role in their lives, a helper, a friend, perhaps even a guardian. However, this routine was not without challenges. Daniel had to remain secretive. The town was small and people noticed unusual behavior. One evening, Mrs. Kapoor, a neighbor, saw him walking near the woods with a bag in his hands. "Daniel, are you going to feed the stray cats again?" she asked, smiling. Daniel nodded, hiding his nervousness. "Yes, just the cats," he said. In truth, it was more than cats. The thought that someone might discover the mother and child made him cautious, but he was determined to protect them. As days turned into weeks, Daniel learned to read the child's emotions. It had expressive eyes, and he could sense its happiness, fear, or curiosity. He began to respond in kind, using gentle gestures and soft tones. Sometimes he would wave and the child would wave back. Sometimes he would sit quietly, and the child would mimic his calm. These silent exchanges became the foundation of a growing friendship. One night, a storm approached. The wind howled and rain began to fall. Daniel feared for their safety. He ran into the woods, carrying extra blankets and food. He found them huddled together under a fallen tree. The child shivered, and the mother's glowing eyes reflected worry. Daniel carefully placed the blankets around them and offered some dry food. The mother did not speak, but she watched him with what felt like gratitude. The child reached out and touched his hand lightly. Daniel felt a connection that went beyond words. In that moment, he understood the depth of their bond. Over time, Daniel's routine became more than a nightly task. It became a ritual of trust and care. He began to notice subtle changes in their behavior. The child started approaching him without hesitation, sometimes climbing onto his lap while he sat at the edge of the forest. The mother allowed this, remaining close but not intervening. She seemed to sense that Daniel meant no harm. Daniel, in turn, felt a growing sense of responsibility. He was not just feeding them, he was protecting them, learning from them, and forming a bond that was rare and precious. Daniel also began to notice changes in himself. His days felt brighter, knowing that he would see them at night. He became more patient, more observant, and more thoughtful. The loneliness that had once filled his evenings faded, replaced by purpose. He started to appreciate small things, the sound of the wind in the trees, the glow of the moon on the leaves, the quiet trust that had formed between him and the two beings. One particularly quiet night, Daniel brought a small lantern. He placed it near the blanket where they usually sat. The soft glow did not frighten them. Instead, the child approached, curious about the light, while the mother watched carefully. Daniel realized that they were beginning to understand his intentions, just as he had begun to understand theirs. It was a silent communication, built on patience, respect, and care. By now, Daniel had created a safe space near the edge of the forest. He cleared a small area, placed blankets, food, and some simple toys. It became their nightly meeting place. He did not know where they came from or why they were here, but he knew that he wanted them to stay safe and happy. Each night he felt a sense of joy that he had never experienced before. He was part of something extraordinary, a secret connection that belonged only to him, the mother, and the child. And so, night after night, Daniel's quiet routine continued. He would walk to the edge of the forest, bring food and small gifts, and watch as the mother and child approached, slowly and cautiously. He learned their rhythms, their gestures, and their quiet songs. In return, they learned to trust him, to accept his presence, and to allow him into their small hidden world. Daniel's life had changed. What had started as curiosity and concern had grown into something deeper. He had found companionship, purpose, and a rare kind of friendship. And though he did not know what the future held, he was ready to continue this nightly journey, caring for the mother and child who had unexpectedly become a part of his life. Weeks turned into months, and Daniel's nightly visits became the most important part of his life. The mother and child no longer stayed hidden in the shadows. Instead, they came closer, waiting for him at the edge of the forest as if they knew he would arrive. Daniel noticed subtle changes in their behavior. The child began to recognize him immediately, rushing forward with excitement while the mother stayed close, her presence calm and protective. Daniel had started to understand their ways of communicating. The mother used gentle hand movements and soft sounds, almost like music, to express herself. The child often repeated these sounds, sometimes adding tiny gestures of its own. Daniel responded in kind, using slow, careful movements and soft tones. They did not need words. Their trust and understanding grew in silence. It was a language of care, patience, and observation. One night, Daniel brought a small wooden toy he had carved himself. The child's eyes lit up, and it held the toy delicately, turning it over with curiosity. The mother watched silently, her glow brighter than usual, as if approving the gift. Daniel felt a warm happiness he had never experienced before. It was not just about feeding them anymore. It was about sharing moments, building a connection, and being part of their lives. Daniel noticed that he was changing too. He became more patient and attentive, noticing every small detail. The way the child tilted its head, the soft glow of the mother's skin in the moonlight, the patterns of their movement through the forest. He learned to sit quietly, letting them approach him, understanding that trust could not be rushed. He began to see the world differently, appreciating small joys and quiet moments. One evening, a cool breeze blew through the trees, rustling the leaves. Daniel placed food on the cloth and stepped back. The child approached, but instead of eating immediately, it looked at Daniel, then at the mother. The mother nodded slightly, and the child finally began to eat. Daniel watched them carefully, feeling a deep sense of connection. He realized that these moments were about more than survival. They were about understanding and love. Over time, Daniel began to talk to them, sharing stories of his day. He described the library, the visitors, the small events in town. He did not know if they understood the words, but he knew they understood his feelings. The child would listen attentively, sometimes touching his hand gently while the mother would watch with quiet attention. Daniel felt as if he had found a family he had never known he needed. One particularly cold night, Daniel brought extra blankets and laid them near the food. The child approached cautiously, shivering slightly. The mother stayed close, her presence protective. Daniel draped a blanket gently over the child and sat nearby, watching. The child rested against the blanket, and Daniel felt a rush of warmth. He realized that these creatures trusted him not only to feed them but to care for them, to keep them safe. Daniel also learned that the mother and child had a routine of their own. They often explored the forest for small items, returning to Daniel each night. The child loved small, shiny objects, while the mother seemed to appreciate the quiet company and gestures of kindness. Daniel began to leave simple gifts, stones, small branches, and bits of cloth. The child would examine each item carefully, showing them to the mother, who would nod in approval. One night, Daniel noticed something extraordinary. The child climbed onto a small rock and mimicked his gestures exactly. It raised its hand, tilted its head, and smiled in a way that mirrored Daniel. He laughed softly, amazed at how intelligent and perceptive the child was. The mother watched, her eyes glowing softly as if she was proud. Daniel realized that this bond was growing stronger each day. They were not only surviving together, they were learning from each other, understanding each other, and forming a connection that went beyond words. Daniel began to anticipate their needs. If he saw the child shivering, he brought extra blankets. If the food ran out, he made sure to leave more. He learned their preferences, their habits, and even their small quirks. The mother, once distant and cautious, now allowed him to sit closer, often observing him quietly as he worked to make their nights more comfortable. Daniel felt a profound sense of responsibility and pride. One night, as he prepared food, he noticed the child looking at him with a curious expression. It seemed to be asking a question, tilting its head and making soft sounds. Daniel smiled and spoke gently, explaining the story of a book he had read at the library that day. The child listened intently while the mother remained nearby. Daniel realized that this was more than feeding. It was teaching, sharing, and communicating. He had become a part of their lives, and they had become a part of his. The emotional bond deepened further when Daniel began to include them in small routines. He would hum softly while setting the food, and the child would imitate the sound. He would tap gently on the ground, and the child would copy. These simple games became a form of communication, a way of expressing joy, trust, and affection. The mother watched with a calm and gentle presence, occasionally joining in with small gestures. Daniel felt a connection that words could never fully describe. As weeks passed, Daniel realized that he had grown attached in ways he had never imagined. He thought about them during the day, worrying if they were safe, imagining their small gestures, and looking forward to the next night. He felt joy when the child approached him eagerly, and comfort when the mother allowed him to sit near them. Daniel's life, once quiet and solitary, had transformed into something full of meaning, love, and wonder. He understood that this bond was fragile. The mother and child could leave at any time, and he might never see them again. Yet he also realized that this fleeting time was precious. Each night was a gift, an opportunity to share moments of trust, care, and companionship. He vowed silently to protect them, to continue their routine, and to nurture the connection that had grown between them. One clear night, Daniel brought a small lantern to the forest edge. The light was soft, not too bright, and it illuminated their small meeting space. The child approached with curiosity, while the mother watched calmly. Daniel sat down, and the child climbed onto his lap, resting its head lightly against him. The mother stayed nearby, glowing softly in the moonlight. Daniel felt a deep, peaceful happiness knowing that they had accepted him into their lives. In that quiet moment, Daniel realized something important. This bond was no longer about feeding or caring alone. It was about understanding, trust, and love. He had found friends who were unlike any he had ever known, and they had found someone who would protect and care for them. Daniel felt a sense of belonging he had never experienced before. As he walked back home that night, he looked toward the forest edge, where the mother and child remained, watching him leave. He smiled softly, feeling a warmth in his heart. Their silent companionship had become a part of his life, and he knew that the nights ahead would continue to bring wonder, trust, and the quiet joy of friendship. Daniel's nights in the forest had become a comforting routine. He looked forward to seeing the mother and child, bringing them food, small gifts, and his quiet company. Over time, he had grown attached in ways he could not fully explain. The child's curious gestures, the mother's gentle watchfulness, and the small moments of understanding had created a bond stronger than anything Daniel had ever known. But one night, everything felt different. The forest was silent, unusually so. The wind did not rustle the leaves as it usually did, and even the distant hoot of an owl seemed absent. Daniel carried his usual bag of food, expecting the familiar faces to greet him, but when he arrived at their spot, the clearing was empty. He called softly, "Hello? Are you there?" But only the sound of his own voice returned. A wave of panic swept over him. He hurried to nearby areas, scanning the shadows and calling their names, though he did not know if they understood words. His heart pounded in his chest. The child's small laughter, which had once greeted him each night, was gone. The mother's calm glow was nowhere to be seen. Fear gripped him. What if something had happened to them? What if they had left forever? Daniel searched the forest carefully, stepping over roots and rocks, calling their names again. Finally, in a small clearing farther away, he saw them. The child stood at the edge of a cluster of trees, looking hesitant, while the mother stayed just behind, her posture tense. Daniel exhaled a sigh of relief, but it was mixed with worry. They had moved farther than usual, and the hesitation in their gestures told him that something had changed. He approached slowly, not wanting to frighten them again. The mother watched him closely, her glowing eyes alert. The child took a small step forward, then retreated, unsure. Daniel realized that they were cautious, perhaps unsure of whether he could be trusted completely. His heart ached at the thought of losing them. He crouched down, keeping his hands visible, and spoke softly. "It's okay. I won't hurt you. Please come closer." The mother made a soft musical sound, which Daniel interpreted as a warning or a question. She gestured toward the forest, pointing to the trees, then back to him. It was clear that she wanted to protect the child, but also wanted to communicate something important. Daniel nodded, trying to show understanding. He placed the food he had brought down on the ground and stepped back, giving them space. The child, after a few moments of hesitation, moved toward the food, picking it up carefully. The mother followed, watching closely, but she did not retreat this time. Daniel felt a small relief, knowing that the bond they had formed was still strong, even if trust needed to be rebuilt. He realized that fear was natural, for them and for him. They had been alone, navigating a world that was foreign and sometimes dangerous. His presence had become familiar, but he needed to respect their caution. That night, Daniel sat quietly, observing them. He spoke softly, telling them stories of his day, hoping that his calm voice would reassure them. The child gradually relaxed, playing with a small shiny stone Daniel had brought. The mother's glow softened, and she moved closer, allowing Daniel to sit near them. The fear of loss lingered, but Daniel felt a quiet hope. He understood that relationships, even extraordinary ones, required patience, trust, and care. In the following nights, Daniel made subtle changes. He brought extra blankets in case the child felt cold, carried food in quieter containers to avoid startling them, and used gentle gestures to communicate safety. Slowly, the mother and child responded positively, showing small signs of trust. The child would approach more quickly, and the mother allowed him to sit closer. Daniel realized that the bond between them was not only built on feeding and gifts, but also on understanding, patience, and respect for their world. However, the fear of losing them never fully disappeared. Daniel began to imagine what life would be like if they suddenly left. He thought about the quiet evenings, the empty clearing, and the absence of small gestures and soft sounds. Each night, he reminded himself to cherish every moment, to be present, and to nurture the connection that had become so precious to him. One evening, Daniel brought a small lantern to illuminate the area gently. He wanted them to feel safe, and the soft glow seemed to calm the child immediately. The mother approached cautiously, her eyes reflecting the light. Daniel extended his hand slowly, and the child took it. A small but meaningful gesture. The mother observed, then moved closer, allowing Daniel to be near them. That night, Daniel realized that the fear of loss was a reminder of how deeply he cared. Without that fear, he might not have understood the true value of their bond. As the weeks passed, Daniel continued to strengthen their connection. He began to anticipate their needs. If the child appeared hesitant, he offered comfort through gestures and soft words. If the mother seemed alert or tense, he gave her space, respecting her protective instincts. He learned that trust was fragile but powerful, and that patience could turn fear into companionship. One particularly quiet night, Daniel noticed the child exploring a small area of the clearing. The mother followed, watching closely. Daniel observed from a short distance, allowing them the freedom to move while remaining nearby. The child picked up small twigs and arranged them carefully, as if creating a little game. Daniel smiled quietly, amazed at the child's intelligence and curiosity. The mother made soft musical sounds, guiding the child gently. Daniel realized that they were teaching him too, how to care without controlling, how to love without demanding. The fear of losing them also taught Daniel to treasure each moment. He began to notice the smallest details, the way the child's eyes sparkled when happy, the mother's subtle gestures of reassurance, and the rhythm of their nightly routine. He understood that these moments were rare, precious, and fragile. Each night he promised himself to be patient, understanding, and present, knowing that their trust could be taken away if mishandled. One night, as he was leaving, Daniel paused at the edge of the clearing. The mother and child were watching him, their eyes glowing softly in the moonlight. Daniel felt a surge of emotion. He had faced fear, uncertainty, and loneliness, but through it all, he had built a bond that was extraordinary. He smiled softly and whispered, "I will take care of you. I promise." That night, Daniel walked home with a lighter heart. The fear of loss remained, but it was no longer paralyzing. Instead, it reminded him of the importance of trust, patience, and love. He had discovered something rare and beautiful, companionship that transcended words, species, and worlds. And he knew deep down that he would do everything in his power to protect the mother and child, to keep them safe, and to nurture the extraordinary connection that had changed his life forever. Daniel had spent countless nights in the forest, growing closer to the mother and child. Their bond had deepened over time, built on trust, care, and shared moments of quiet companionship. Yet, despite the closeness, a quiet worry lingered in Daniel's heart. What if they one day decided to leave? The thought filled him with a mix of fear and longing. He wanted more than anything for them to stay near him, to become a permanent part of his life. One clear evening, Daniel carried his usual bag of food along with a small, soft blanket and a few simple toys he had made. The moon was bright, casting silver light across the clearing where they usually met. The mother and child were already waiting, their eyes reflecting the gentle glow of the night. Daniel felt a flutter of hope. Tonight, he decided, he would try something new, something that went beyond feeding and quiet gestures. He sat at the edge of the clearing and placed the food down carefully. The child approached immediately, picking up a piece of bread, while the mother stayed slightly behind, watching carefully. Daniel spoke softly, using his calmest voice. "I want you to stay, not just for one night, but always. I want to take care of you. Will you stay?" He did not expect a verbal answer. The mother and child had never spoken his language, yet Daniel believed that trust and feeling could be communicated without words. He waited patiently, keeping his hands open and his movements slow. The child paused, looking up at him with wide, curious eyes as if considering his request. The mother tilted her head, observing him closely, her glow gentle and steady. Daniel reached into his bag and pulled out the soft blanket. He laid it carefully on the ground, creating a small safe space. Then he placed one of the wooden toys next to it. The child moved closer, touching the blanket and the toy gently. Daniel smiled softly, feeling that they understood his intention. He stayed quiet, letting his actions speak. Over the next few minutes, Daniel continued to offer small gestures of care. He hummed a quiet tune he had learned at the library, the sound soft and soothing. The child listened, tilting its head in curiosity while the mother watched intently. Slowly, the child began to play with the toy, arranging it carefully on the blanket, and then glanced up at Daniel. The mother stepped closer, allowing him to sit near them. Daniel reached out his hand slowly. The child hesitated for a moment, then touched it gently. The mother stayed nearby, her body language calm, as if testing the moment. Daniel's heart swelled with emotion. He realized that this was more than just asking. They were responding, considering the possibility of staying in his life permanently. As the nights passed, Daniel repeated his gentle request, not with words alone but with actions. He prepared special meals, left soft blankets, and created a safe, inviting space for them near his home. He included small gifts, bright stones, carved wooden figures, and simple toys. Each gesture was an unspoken promise of care and protection. Slowly, the mother and child began to approach him more closely each night, showing comfort, curiosity, and trust. One evening, the child climbed onto the blanket and rested its head lightly against Daniel's arm. The mother stayed nearby, glowing softly in the moonlight. Daniel spoke gently, "I want you to stay here with me. I want to take care of you. You are safe with me." The mother made soft musical sounds, and the child mimicked them. Daniel interpreted this as understanding, and a warm feeling filled his heart. He knew that the bond they shared was stronger than ever. Daniel began to think about the future. He imagined the days ahead filled with small routines, quiet companionship, and shared moments of trust. He knew he could provide safety, food, and comfort. And he also understood that the mother and child offered him something extraordinary: friendship, wonder, and love. He realized that life without them would feel empty, and life with them would be full of meaning. That night, Daniel decided to make one final gesture. He placed the food and blankets in the clearing as usual, but also created a small area with the toys he had made. He arranged everything carefully, making a little nest-like space that seemed welcoming. Then he sat quietly, humming softly and watching. The child approached immediately, exploring the space while the mother stayed close, observing. Daniel held his breath, hoping they would understand his wish. The child looked at him, and for the first time, Daniel felt a sense of clarity. The gestures, the care, the presence, all of it was understood. The mother stepped forward slowly, allowing him to be fully present with them. Daniel reached out his hand, and this time the child took it without hesitation. The mother moved closer, her glow steady and calm. It was a silent agreement, a mutual understanding. They were choosing to stay, at least for now, and Daniel felt an overwhelming sense of joy and relief. Over the next few nights, Daniel noticed a change. The mother and child no longer hesitated to be near him. They explored the clearing freely, sometimes playing with the small toys, sometimes resting on the blanket, always returning to him. Daniel continued to care for them, bringing food, soft blankets, and small gifts. But now, there was an added sense of permanence, a feeling that they belonged together. Daniel's life had transformed completely. The quiet man who once walked alone at night had found companionship, trust, and a family of a kind he had never imagined. The mother and child had become a part of his world, and he a part of theirs. Every gesture, every shared moment strengthened the bond. Daniel knew that their trust was a precious gift, one that he would nurture and protect forever. One night, as he sat quietly watching them, Daniel realized something important. The connection he had with them was rare and extraordinary. It was built not on words but on patience, care, and understanding. The fear of loss he had felt earlier had transformed into gratitude and love. He smiled softly, feeling the warmth of their presence. They were not just visitors in his life, they were family. As he walked home that night, Daniel glanced back at the clearing. The mother and child were there, glowing softly in the moonlight, safe and content. Daniel felt a sense of peace he had never known. He had asked them to stay, and they had chosen to accept him fully into their world. He knew that the nights ahead would be filled with small joys, quiet companionship, and shared understanding. Daniel understood that life was unpredictable, and their presence could not be taken for granted. But he also knew that love, patience, and care could create a bond strong enough to last. The mother and child had found a safe place with him, and he had found friendship, wonder, and meaning in return. Together, they had created a small world of trust, care, and quiet happiness, a world that belonged to all three of them. And so each night continued, filled with food, laughter, soft sounds and gentle gestures. Daniel had asked them to stay, and they had agreed, in the quiet, understanding way only they could. The forest no longer felt empty or lonely. Instead, it was a place of magic, trust, and love. And Daniel knew deep in his heart that this extraordinary bond would remain, glowing softly like the moonlight, for as long as they were together.